Hello everyone, and welcome to this Mastering the Machine Automation Academy video for the 18th of December 2021. I have some unfortunate news. Yesterday we had this webinar in the morning. We did Coffee with Frank and it did not record. So I am having to recreate it today. It will not be as long as the actual discussions we had. Phil Scruggs was on with me and Michael Cox, and we had a nice talk. It actually went over, probably lasted about an hour and a half. We talked about a variety of things. The topic was, we called it Open Season on Frank, because I really didn't have a topic or a guest for today. I've been very busy doing some work for Automation NTH, which is a local engineering firm. And so what I did is I decided to talk a little bit about what I was doing, and if anybody had something they wanted to talk about, and indeed Phil came on and we talked quite a bit about a project that he and I had been discussing for a while and he's been working on. And so we kind of took it as it went. I had hoped that John Brathwaite was going to come on, because part of Coffee with Frank was, I mentioned that I went to Trinidad and I got to bring back a nice coffee cup from the Trinidad Generation Unlimited, which is a power generation plant in Trinidad that I got to climb around on and things. Unfortunately, John wasn't able to make it, but I brought my cup anyway, so it was just kind of a general discussion. What is Mastering the Machine? I talk about this at the beginning of all the webinars. It is named after a document called Mastering the Machine, and you'll find this same little intro on all the other webinars that I've done here on YouTube. But it's available for download at these two sites, automationllc.com, automationprimer.com, and it talks about how do you specify machinery and quote it, and how do you put together all the documentation. And it's kind of evolved into this website called the Automation Academy under my Automation LLC website. And I do these webinars bi-weekly. Every 2 weeks I do them with the same title, and usually I have guests on. This time I was a little lazy, so I didn't get any guests to join me, but Phil joined. What is the Automation Academy? We have training videos for PLCs, do a lot of that kind of stuff, PLCs and sensors and things, job and aptitude assistance, systems integration, and more. It has a library, lots of documents, lots of software. I do have a community set up there with different interest groups, and we do these webinars. So what have I been up to? This is a machine built on a flex base at Automation NTH. And NTH builds a lot of very high-tech equipment for life sciences companies. And they build a lot of it on bases like this. This would be a flexible base that you can put a bunch of these bases together and build a platform, put your control panels underneath it, and control things like robots and indexing systems, dials, things like that. And this one, because it's used in trade shows, I can kind of show a little of. What I've actually been working on for them is putting together a troubleshooting course that looks like this. And so I don't use the flex base, but I do use the trainer that they put all their interns through. They build these little trainers just to teach people with, and they interface them with a conveyor that looks like this. And so what I'm doing is working on a intermediate piece that you put in between the conveyor and the panel, and it disconnects the wires, and that allows people to troubleshoot the system, use a multimeter and that sort of thing. So this is something I need to kind of get done by the end of the year. So I've been out at their place doing a lot of the writing for this, right? So it's a kind of a guided exercise where I show people how to use a meter and go through and diagnose what might be wrong with the system. Then we disconnect some of the signals and have them go to town and try to figure out what's wrong with the system. So that's been this document. In addition, I was very busy finishing up these prototypes for Mr. Mike O'Day. Mike's been on here before, and he talked a little bit about the systems that he's working on for trash compactors for the company he works for. And we're not going to get into too much more detail on that, but he did talk a little bit about the Node-RED programming he was doing on Raspberry Pi. And of course, I've had Jerry Wassinger on here talking about Pi plates, which is these little devices that sandwich the Raspberry Pi together. And Mike did talk a little bit about this cellular modem that he uses to communicate with. So I put together 4 more of those prototypes. This is number 3. Sent them all out to him, and he'll be putting those together. In addition, of course, I'm working on my book, as I've mentioned. I've been working on that for a long time. It's got a little bit about this and a little bit about that, a lot of stuff on robotics, PLCs, etc. I'm really trying to finish that up by the end of the year, but as with a lot of other things, as you start writing, you realize you need other things. So one of the things I've got to do is come through here and put some material on CNCs in here, maybe a little bit more on DCS systems. I've got a lot on PLCs. I've got a lot on tools. I've got a section on using electrical diagnostic equipment, right? Multimeters, things like that. And this goes with the conveyor trainer that I've been talking about, because people need to know a little bit about how to use the multimeters and read schematics. So that's part of what I'm writing into the book, so that people can use the book as a supplement for the exercise. But we did have a really nice discussion yesterday. Phil showed the same photo eye that he had showed before. He put together a garage door opener photo eye, and this was during this webinar, which we talked about, I think October 8th was the date of this webinar, and it should be here on YouTube. But we talked about using these in different devices, and what Phil did is he put together using an ESP32 built into a garage door opener, and then connected to at the time it was wireless, and what it would do is it would keep counts for objects passing in front of the photo eye, and then report back to just wirelessly to a computer. But he's since updated that to using a cellular signal of some kind. I'm not exactly sure what, but one of the things Phil said he was going to do is send that up to me. So I'm looking forward to seeing that and experimenting a little more with it. We want to actually test it. I live up here near Nashville, and we'll probably test that between Nashville and where he lives in Atlanta, and he should be able to log into it and count something. I'll probably set something up here, kind of like this, controller behind me, and maybe make something move and sit here and where he can maybe log in and see it and monitor it and that sort of thing. But yes, I was upset a little bit about yesterday not getting the Zoom capture from this webinar, because we really did have a good discussion, and I know some people log in and look at it. But one of the things that happens when you set Zoom up is if you ever set it up to record, but then you have another webinar in between the time that you're going to have the one you set up, and you change those settings. And so sometimes when I meet with people on Zoom, they don't want to be recorded, understandably, and I turn the recording off, and that's what happened here. I had turned the recording off on another Zoom call, and when I did this webinar, it did not get recorded, which was unfortunate, because I really do like putting these up every 2 weeks. In any case, the next Zoom webinar will be December 31st, and once again, I don't have a guest for it. It's just going to be a kind of recap of the previous year. I'll talk about some of the changes I've been going through, probably update people on the status of my book and the content. I welcome any input on that book. It is going to be a formally published book like my PLC book was, and people will be able to get a hold of it. So if people have things they want me to put in that book and discuss technical subjects, of course, I've already said about all I'm going to say about PLCs, but there's a lot of room in this book. It's called Maintenance and Troubleshooting in Industrial Automation, which leaves a lot of room to discuss different platforms and different things. So if you have anything that you have suggestions for me to put in that book, it's not too late. I hope to be publishing it by January or February next year, but until then I'll be continuing to update content in it, including a lot of things on the sweep machine that I was telling you about. That is going to be the subject of the debug part of the book, since it has a robot in it and some elevators and a safety PLC and things like that. I figured it's a good subject, and of course NTH's big customer Dexcom will be using that as the subject for the technical part of the debug for them, since it resembles their machinery. In any case, that's the next webinar. I'm really sorry this one didn't get recorded. I'm sorry you didn't get to see what Phil had created. It looked pretty good. Hi, Phil, if you're out there and you do watch this back. And thank you, Michael Cox, for showing up and talking a little bit about what you're doing at the wineries in California. You're doing, I know, industrial automation, but of course wineries are a little bit different than your typical manufacturing facility. So this will serve as a placeholder anyway for this webinar, and sorry you couldn't make it. Everybody join us on New Year's Eve morning. If you're not doing anything else, it'll probably be at 9 or 10 o'clock Central Time, but I can move the time as needed, and I promise the next one I will ensure gets recorded. But thank you for checking this out. I suppose before I go, I should show you what this silly hat does. A little bit annoying. Merry Christmas, everybody.